All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Online students, I hope I'm audible to you guys. If I am, please let me know so that we can continue with the class. Good afternoon, Abhishek. All right. So, for our GS Foundation course, we are starting with a new section that is ancient and medieval history along with art and culture, right? Now, before we start discussing the topics under advisement, first, I would like to have a small introductory session. Objectives क्या होंगे? To learn what is history and how is it studied. Secondly, to learn the importance of history for the UPSC Civil Services examination. Thirdly, we'll take a brief overview of the syllabus for the entire GS history. Then we are going to break down this syllabus in the form of a lecture plan. And finally, the reference books or the study material that we should refer to. ठीक है? तो सबसे पहले what is history? आ तो गए हो क्लास में, बताओ अब होता क्या है? What is it? Study of the past. Very good. Creation of the universe किस event के साथ हुआ? The Big Bang. How far back did that take place? 14.2 billion years ago. The Earth and our solar system was formed around 4.5 billion years ago. Right? If you are aware of the geological time scale, you must know that ever since its formation, the Earth has gone through several periods, several eras and epochs. 4 major periods. The Precambrian period, beginning roughly 4.6 billion years ago. The Paleozoic period, beginning roughly 540 million years ago. The Mesozoic period, beginning roughly 240 million years ago. The Cenozoic period, beginning roughly 65 million years ago. Now, these periods are further divided into eras. The two latest eras of the Cenozoic period were the Tertiary and the Quaternary eras. The Quaternary era began roughly 2 million years ago. And it is here that human beings first appeared. So in our study of history, what should be the scope? The entire history of time or only the history of human beings? Only the history of human beings. Thank you बोलिए, सिलेबस मैंने इतना कम कर दिया आपके लिए, राइट? नाउ तो अभी आपको इस एनालिसिस से कुछ और समझ में आया? शुड वी ऑल्टर आवर डेफिनेशन ऑफ हिस्ट्री? क्या होना चाहिए? स्टडी ऑफ human past. Now, suppose if you were to write your own history, so what are the things that you are going to include in it? Are you going to write about each and every meal that you consumed, each and every conversation that you had, each and every experience that you experienced, or are you going to highlight the most significant events? Most significant events. So once again, this definition should be altered. क्या होना चाहिए? Study of the significant events of the human past, right? But by doing this, what are we doing? We are simply selectively looking at the highlight reels of any particular narrative without understanding the interconnections between those developments. Is this the proper way of studying history? No. There should be a proper flow, a narrative to history. तभी वो history complete होता है. Without that, our understanding of history would remain distorted. And how to logically arrange the significant events of the past? In accordance with the flow of time, right? And thus, this study also needs to be chronological in nature, right? So it is the chronological study of the past, of the significant human events of the past. ठीक है? Chronological का मतलब in accordance with time, sequentially arranged in accordance with time. So पहले की चीजों को बाद की चीजों से पहले पढ़ना पड़ेगा, so that the clear association of the interlinkages between these events starts developing. But even this is not sufficient. और क्या करना पड़ेगा साथ में? See, it is also important while studying these significant events of the past in a chronological manner that you should be able to connect the different dots of history. You should be able to pinpoint the factors behind every development and how that particular event or development became the trigger point for developments of the future, right? So a degree of critical analysis is also required. So it is a critical chronological study of the significant events of the human past. And this is a good enough functional definition of history for our purposes. We are simply novices in this field. अभी हम नौसिखिए हैं, तो इससे ज्यादा academic होने की जरूरत नहीं है, right? So open your notebooks and ये line लिख लीजिए. History is the critical chronological study of the significant events of the human past. Of the human past. यहां तक का मामला क्लियर है सबको? All right. Now, how is history studied? What is the basis of studying history? Is history divined by scholars out of vacuum, or is it based upon some evidence? It is an empirical study. It is an evidence-based study. What is the kind of evidence that historians rely upon to create a picture of the past? The various historical sources, namely literature and archaeology, right? So, how is history studied? On the basis of the critical analysis of historical sources, right? These may be either literary or archaeological. What do you understand when I say the phrase archaeological evidence? क्या होता है ये? These are the physical remains of the past. These are the physical remains left behind by previous cultures and communities that we may obtain through physical excavations and explorations, both vertical as well as horizontal. ठीक है? इसमें पुराने और नए टूल्स कई तरह के यूज होते हैं. For example, new tools such as LiDAR technology, sonar technology, DNA analysis, computer analysis, these kinds of things have now been started to be used. Okay? Archaeological sources vary to a quite significant degree. They include things such as inscriptions, coins, fossils, settlements, structures and monuments, tools and other implements, ornaments, weapons, graves, cultural artifacts such as paintings or sculptures, etc. Right? तो इसके अलावा भी कई और टाइप के हो सकते हैं. Main thing to remember is that these are physical remains of the past that historians use in order to recreate a picture of the past. Is this clear? Sure. Literary sources, when it comes to Indian history, have been categorized into two types. Foreign sources, that means the writings of foreign travelers who visited India during various stages of development, and indigenous sources or the native sources, which were the works of Indian intellectuals and scholars. ठीक है? Among the foreign travelers, there are three prominent groups. So these were the cultures which wrote about India most profusely. These include the Greeks and Romans, the Chinese, and last group, the Arabs. Indigenous sources may be further subdivided into two categories. किस तरह के? religious works and secular works. Religious works associated with the great Indian religions such as Hinduism or Brahmanism, Jainism, Buddhism, etc. Secular sources of various varieties such as dramas, plays, epics, poetic works, or scientific manuals or treatises of that nature, works on statecraft, polity, law, etc. These kinds of works can be included in secular literature. Is this clear? Now, my question to you is, are both kinds of sources, that is literary as well as archaeological sources, available for every period of ancient and medieval history? No, we are limited in this respect. And this has led historians to periodize history into two distinct categories. Right? एक फेज को बोलते हैं prehistoric phase. And the second one is known as the historical phase. Right? How do we distinguish between the two? What is the basis? The availability of sources. Prehistoric phase of the human past refers to that period in which script did not exist. Human beings had not developed any script. Therefore, is there going to be any written record? Nahi hoga, right? And therefore, human beings have to rely only and only upon, or historians have to rely only and only upon, archaeological sources only. Right? And which part of ancient Indian history are we going to put in this phase? Not the Indus Valley civilization. Period before that. Prehistoric age किसको बोलते हैं? The Stone Ages को, right? That is the earliest phase of human development, when human beings did not use any script and thus left behind no written records. Historical phase refers to that period of history when human beings had started leaving behind their own written records. And therefore, both literary and archaeological evidence exists. And in the context of Indian history, ये कौन से period को represent करेगा? The Buddha age onwards, so post-Vedic period onwards, right? That is 600 BCE onwards. But this kind of classification leaves a big gap in Indian history, right? यहाँ पे कौन से cultures हमने include नहीं किए हैं? The Vedic culture and the Indus Valley civilization, the Harappan civilization. And for that, a new category was inserted into this classification, that is proto-historical phase. Now, this was a transitional phase between the prehistoric and historical phase. That means proto-historical past refers to that period of the history for which written records did exist, but for some reason or the other, they are either not reliable or cannot be used for reconstructing a picture of the past. Okay? So, written records exist, but either the script remains undeciphered or the writings are not contemporary to the period under study. Okay? So, two criteria we have pointed out, that either the script has not been deciphered and therefore the written material is almost inaccessible to modern historians. In accordance with this definition, which age or which civilization can we put under the proto-historical phase? The Indus Saraswati civilization or the Harappan civilization. Right? And second definition kya hai? That the written records exist but are not contemporary to the period under study. And in accordance with this definition, the Vedic age qualifies as proto-historic past. Why? What is the most important literary source for the Vedic age? The Vedas. There are 4 Vedas. But peculiarity ye hai that although these Vedas were composed during the Vedic age themselves, they were written down for the first time after the end of the Vedic age. Right? And what do we have access to? To the oral traditions through which the Vedic people, through which the Aryans transmitted these learnings from generation to generation, or do we have access only to the written records? We have access only to the written records, and those records belong to the post-Vedic age. They are not contemporary with the Vedic age. Okay? So they were composed during the Vedic age, but compiled much later. That is why we are putting the Vedic age in the category of proto-historical phase. इतना clear है? समझ में आया है सबको? No doubts, I hope. Now, second question. What is the importance of history for the civil services examination? If you look at the previous year's question papers, you are going to clearly be able to establish the importance of history, right? In the prelims, out of the 100 questions that appear in the GS paper 1, roughly 1/5 are directly from history. If you pick up 2023 question paper, prelims question paper, 19 questions were from history. 2022 में 22 questions were from history. 2020 में roughly 17-18 questions from history. So this has been the trend, and this trend is going to remain, right? So that is one thing. For the mains, history comes under which paper? Paper 1. Right? Out of the 250 marks that the entire paper is worth, roughly 100 to 110 marks are allotted to history out of 250. तो ये तो हो गया इसका direct significance. But history also has a great degree of indirect significance. Your GS syllabus also includes the study of other subjects such as polity, economy, international relations, society, etc. All of these are what kind of studies? Social studies or scientific studies? Social studies. So the human element is central to all of these, and therefore they have evolved over a long period of time. And to address or to understand these topics better, you have to delve into the past. And history can provide you the key to unraveling all these subjects, such as polity or international relations or society, or let's say even economy, etc. For example, in the field of international relations, what are the biggest flashpoints that we are seeing in history right now or in international relations right now? Important developments kya hai? Major wars that are going on, such as in Israel, Ukraine, Yemen, etc. Right? Now, in order to understand the factors for war in Israel, Ukraine, or Yemen, do you not need to go into the past to see the roots of these problems? Yes, and that is the purpose of history. History is going to bring you to the root causes of all these issues, and you will be able to develop a holistic picture regarding these issues. Okay? So, ये तो हो गया significance. Next, let us look at the entire syllabus. Now, history में you can conveniently divide your syllabus into various sections. कौन से sections? Ancient Indian history, then medieval Indian history, then modern Indian history, then post-independence history, then world history, and finally art and culture, consisting of aspects such as painting, music, dance, drama, architecture, culture, folk traditions, etc. Okay? Now, these two sections, number 4 and 5, that is post-independence and world history, that is not part of your prelims syllabus. That is for mains only. While the other sections, that is 1, 2, 3 and number 6, they are both for prelims as well as mains. Now, I have the responsibility of teaching you ancient and medieval India along with art and culture. ठीक है? Art and culture के जितने अलग-अलग dimensions हैं, we are not going to cover each of them separately. The best way to learn about these things is to integrate them into the chronological structure of history. So we are going to study them along with ancient and medieval India. Some subjects which may not be neatly integrated into the chronological syllabus, those we are going to cover separately. For example, पेंटिंग्स और डांस और म्यूजिक एटसेट्रा, इनके ऊपर अलग से 3-4 क्लासेस लेंगे. अदरवाइज all the other aspects of art and culture we are trying to integrate with the main syllabus itself, right? Now coming to the breakdown of the syllabus, or the lecture plan, let us see what exactly we are going to study when we cover the various phases of history. It is not necessary that you should write all these things down. This is only for your instruction. I want to give you a complete picture of what we are going to do before we start to study the things, right? So if you want to write down, you can, but it is not necessary, right? Now, first of all, we are going to start with ancient Indian history, right? Within that, the first thing that we are going to tackle is the Stone Ages, or the prehistoric part. This was an extremely long period lasting almost 5 lakh years and has been further subdivided into various stone ages, namely the Paleolithic age, Mesolithic age, Neolithic age, and the Chalcolithic age. The Paleolithic age, which is the oldest of these as well as the longest, is further subdivided into the Lower Paleolithic age, Middle Paleolithic age, and the Upper Paleolithic age, right? Now, while analyzing the human condition throughout these stages, what are the various dimensions that we are going to focus upon? We are going to keep one eye on the evolving climatic conditions. We are also going to analyze the process of human evolution. We are going to note the incremental improvements in human technology, stone technology. We are going to also study the subsistence pattern during these various phases. How did human beings obtain their food? We are also going to take a look at the settlement and dwelling pattern. That means, what was their lifestyle like? Did they live in the same place permanently, or did they constantly move around in search of food? If they were living in the same place, what kind of shelters were they using? Were they using natural shelters or artificial houses, etc.? These kinds of things. So settlement and dwelling pattern. We are also going to consider their geographical footprint. Where exactly did human beings prefer to live during these Paleolithic or during these stone ages, and what were the places that they avoided? What were the regions that they avoided? The factors behind this, these kinds of things we are going to study. And finally, we are going to look at their society and culture. ठीक है? तो ये सब हमको कवर करना है. With this, we'll have covered the earliest phase of human life in ancient India. Then following this, we'll move on to the earliest known civilization in the Indian subcontinent, the first Bronze Age civilization in India. कौन सा? The Harappan civilization. What are the things that we are going to talk about? The origins of the Harappan civilization. What were the factors behind its emergence? The discovery and early excavations of the Harappan civilization. The important sites and findings. And finally, what do these things tell us about life in the Harappan civilization? Their material culture, that is their economic life, their agriculture, crafts production, trade and commerce, etc. Their society, religion, and polity. And finally, the process of the decline of the Harappan civilization, in which we are going to discuss not only the factors responsible for the decline of the Harappan civilization, but also how the definition of the decline of the Harappan civilization has come under review in the recent years. Earlier, it was believed that the Harappan civilization disappeared suddenly and in its mature phase, in its developed phase, all the cities and towns were abandoned overnight. Now, that thinking is changing and a new picture has emerged. So, we are also going to talk about the meaning of decline. And over here, we are going to focus upon the elements of change and continuity. So, what were the things that changed with the so-called decline of the Harappan civilization, and what were the things that continued? What was the link between the Harappan civilization and the post-Harappan cultures? And are any of those elements visible today or not? These kinds of questions we are going to try and address. Clear hai? Following this, we are going to come to the Vedic age. Right? Now, the Vedic age has been divided into two sub-phases. The early Vedic age and the later Vedic age. And our main task is going to be to underline the changes or transformations that took place from the early to the later Vedic ages. Basis of our analysis will be the sources that are available to us to study these two ages, the various narratives of the origin and geographical extent of the Aryans during these phases. We are going to underline the process of eastward migration of Aryans during the later Vedic age from the Punjab region up to the mid-Ganga valley. So these kinds of things we are going to study. Then we are also going to underline the changes in polity, economy, society, and culture. Clear hai? And these changes are also going to become a major cause in triggering India's second urbanization. This period in Indian history is known as the Mahajanpat period or the age of Buddha, right? So that is what we are going to tackle next. The Mahajanpat period or second urbanization. We are going to look at the 16 different large territorial kingdoms or Mahajanpadas which emerged across the Indian subcontinent during this period. We are going to shed light on the political scenario which was characterized by frequent warfare. There was an attempt by different Mahajanpadas to create an all India empire, out of which one of these Mahajanpadas succeeded. कौन था सबसे powerful? Magad in the central Gangetic Valley, Bihar wale region में. So we are going to underline the factors behind the rise of Magad. Then we are also going to underline that how towards the end of the Mahajanpat period, a very important development took place which connected the two great civilizational systems of the world with each other for the first time in a direct manner. एक फॉरेन इन्वेडर पहुंचा इंडिया के वेस्टर्न बाउंड्री पर. कौन? Alexander, right? We are going to look at Alexander's invasion and its impact. Clear hai? Now, in the same period, we also need to keep an eye on the important religious, philosophical, and cultural developments that were going on. So, what was the most significant socio-religious reform movement that was taking place during this period? Jainism and Buddhism. What are the things that we'll focus upon? The factors behind the emergence or origin of these philosophical systems, some biographical details about their founders, their teachings, and philosophy, the impact that they had on shaping art and culture or contribution to literature and culture, the subsequent evolution of these belief systems following their establishment, following their foundation, and the process of ultimate decline, not of Jainism, but of Buddhism. So these things we are going to consider, right? Now, following the Mahajanpat period, the next important phase of political activity in India took place under the which dynasty? Mauryan dynasty. We have to consider the contributions of important kings. Three early kings of the Mauryans: Chandragupta Maurya, Bindusar, and Ashok was the most significant. In association with Ashok, what are the important things that we'll be focusing upon? First of all, the long inscriptions that he left behind. These were royal orders or edicts. And secondly, his new socio-economic and political framework, which was meant to induce order into the society. That is the concept of Dhamma, right? These things we are going to cover. And then finally, the factors responsible for the decline of the Mauryan Empire. This we are going to cover. Following this, we come to a lengthy period known as the post-Mauryan age. Where we see a great degree of political activity and state formation, both by indigenous as well as foreign ruling groups. After the decline of the Mauryan Empire, the northwestern frontier of the subcontinent became unstable, allowing many foreign groups to come and establish their spheres of influence over the northwestern subcontinent. कौन-कौन से 4 foreign ruling groups थे? The earliest were the Indo-Greeks or the Bactrians, followed by the Pahalwas or Parthians, followed by the Shakas or Scythians, and finally the Kushans or the Yuchi, right? What are the things that we are going to look at when covering all these things? First of all, important kings, their achievements, and important developments that took place, then their contributions in various fields such as religion, coinage, art and architecture. These things we are going to consider, right? Then this was also the period when in the Deccan, independent state formation started taking place for the first time and the first native dynasty emerged in the Deccan. कौन सा? The Satvahan dynasty, which created its own empire. In their context, we are also going to look at similar things. Then this was also the first time that urban civilization started to sprout up in the deep south. Which age are we talking about? कौन सा famous Tamil literature है इस period का? The Sangam literature, the Sangam age and society. And finally, another significant development that took place during this period. This was a period when India, China, and the Western world, the Roman Empire, and the entire Mediterranean zone were interconnected with each other through the Silk Road and the maritime Silk Route. What is this period known for? For brisk trade between these various civilizational systems. इसको क्या बोलते हैं? The Indo-Roman trade. When talking about the Indo-Roman trade, what are we going to talk about? the various sources which inform us about the existence of this trade, the various routes and the ports that were important, the items of import and export, the balance of trade, whether it was favorable to India or unfavorable, how was this trade perceived in the Western world, right? So these kinds of things we are going to talk about. So ये हो जाएगा post Mauryan period. यहाँ तक का clear है picture? Next period is going to be the Gupta age. Here we need to talk about the important kings and their contributions, the nature of the Gupta administration, that is their taxation policy, provincial governance, foreign relations, the position of the king, etc. These kinds of things we are going to cover. Gupta age is also known as the golden age of India, or at least it was known as the golden age of India. Now it is known as the age of Sanskrit classicism in India, right? So we also have to take a look at their contributions to art and literature, right? In the field of art, important developments started taking place during the Gupta period. For the first time, temple construction started, right? तो यहाँ पे हम जो मोस्ट इम्पोर्टेंट टाइप्स ऑफ टेम्पल्स इंडिया में एग्जिस्ट करते हैं उसको कवर कर लेंगे. कौन कौन से? नगर आर्ट, द्रविडियन आर्ट एंड Vesara art. Similarly, post-Mauryan period was the golden age for sculptural art, right? Three prominent sculptural schools emerged: Gandhar art, Mathura art, and the Amravati art. Now, in both these cases, we are going to perform a comparative analysis. What are the common features? What are the different features in each of these art forms? Where do the artists draw inspiration from? Where do the techniques belong to? Do they belong to India or do they belong to some Western civilization? What is the thematic or the thematic content of these kinds of art forms? These kinds of things we are going to cover. Right? Then in literature, we are going to focus exclusively upon Sanskrit literature, primarily of the secular variety. This was the age of Kalidas, Banabhat, Vishakadatta, Shudrak, etc. Right? So, unke important works, contributions, those things we are going to cover. Then we come to the post-Gupta period. Most significant development क्या है? The reign of Harshvardhan. What are we going to see? His rise to power and process of consolidation, political consolidation. His contributions to art and religion, and the writings of two famous personality scholars, one Indian, one Chinese. कौन कौन? बाणभट्ट and दूसरा Huensang or Yuan Chang. Right? With this, we will have finished our study of ancient Indian history, and we will now graduate to the medieval history of India. First, we'll have to establish a definite link between ancient and medieval history, and this period of transition, which lasted for almost 500 years, is known as the early medieval age. Important developments that we'll have to keep an eye on: the tripartite struggle between three powerful empires covering the whole of the subcontinent between the 8th and 10th centuries. Right? कौन सी तीन पावर्स थी हैं? The Gurjar Pratiharas, Rashtrakutas, and the Palas in western, southern, and eastern India, respectively. We are going to look at the factors behind this struggle and the outcome of this struggle and its impact. One of the outcomes of this struggle was that none of them were able to sustain themselves. 200 years of warfare had robbed them of their vitality and strength, and all these powers disintegrated almost simultaneously. They were replaced by small warring principalities of Rajput kings. Right? So we are going to look at the Rajput period. Its society, polity, the nature of economic activities that were going on, the political relations that they had with each other, how they arranged themselves politically, what was the social dimension like, what was the social structure like, what were the strengths and weaknesses of this political system. Right? Then, this was the first instance when an Islamic power started making inroads into India. Who were the first group of Islamic invaders in India? Arabs or Turks? No, it was the Arabs. They not only invaded India but were the first to create their own political hegemony over a particular portion of India. Arab rule कहाँ पर establish हुआ beginning from the 8th century onwards? In which part of India? Sindh mein, right? So we have to look at the Arab conquest of Sindh, the factors behind it and its impact, its cultural and economic impact. And finally, another important development was the beginning of Turkish invasions and the ultimate Turkish conquest of North India. Right? This was a process which lasted almost 3 centuries, from the 10th to the 12th century. Now, for this period, there are a couple of sources that we must keep an eye on. First and foremost is the Tawarikh-e-Hind. It is very important, or it is a very valuable source to study the picture of 11th century India. Its writer Al-Biruni has presented a critical account of the Indian society, its religious systems, its education, and its weaknesses. Right? So, ye sab. Then the writings of certain Arab travelers, such as Al-Suleiman, Al-Biladuri, Al-Masudi, etc. right? So these kinds of things we must keep an eye on. Now, this process ended with the Turkish conquest of North India and the establishment of the Delhi Sultanate. With this, we are going to enter the medieval Indian history phase proper. Right? How are we going to proceed over here chronologically? Right? 5 dynasties, several kings. Out of all the kings that ruled the Delhi Sultanate, 6 are the most important. कौन कौन? कुतुबुद्दीन ऐबक, इल्तुतमिश, बलबन, अलाउद्दीन खिलजी, Muhammad bin Tughlaq, and Firoz Shah Tughlaq. What are the kinds of things that we are going to talk about? Their theories of kingship. That means we are going to evaluate their ruling philosophy. We are going to talk about the different administrative policies employed by these kings to expand their power or to sustain their rule. We are also going to look at the impact of these administrative policies. We are going to study the process of economic and urban development. What were the factors which facilitated the rapid growth of the economy during this period? What were the features of urbanization? How was it different from the past, etc.? And their contributions to art and culture. Okay? While conducting this analysis, once again some important Persian sources we need to refer to. कौन से sources हैं ये? The तारीख है, sorry, the Tabaqat-e-Nasiri by Siraj, Minhaj-us-Siraj. The तारीख है फिरोज शाही by Ziauddin Barni. And a sequel to the same book, Tariq-e-Firoz Shahi, it was written as a continuation of the original work by another scholar, a subsequent scholar. So Tariq-e-Firoz Shahi by Samse Siraj Afif, along with a number of other works. Okay? So these are the most important things that we have to keep in mind. Is this much clear? Then we also have to keep an eye on the philosophical and religious developments that were taking place during this period. This period was important for the emergence of medieval bhakti and Sufi movements. Two types of bhakti: Nirgun and Sagun bhakti. two types of Sagun Bhakti, Saivite and Vaishnavite Bhakti, right? We are going to look at the origin of Bhakti, the factors responsible for it, its philosophical content, and its social and cultural impact. Okay? Similarly, for Sufism, we are going to cover all these things, and we are also going to individually study the various Sufi orders which flourished in India. One scholar who was a contemporary of Akbar, his name was Abul Fazl. He wrote a very encyclopedic work known as the Akbarnama, in which he has informed us that within Akbar's empire there used to flourish as many as 16 different Sufi silsilas. Right? So we are going to discuss all these silsilas, or at least the most important ones. Okay? Then, at the time that the Delhi Sultanate was declining in North India, new powers were emerging in the southern regions. कौन थे ये? The Vijayanagar Empire and the Bahmani Sultanate. What do we need to study over here? Firstly, their origin, the important dynasties, kings, and their contributions, with special emphasis on which emperor of Vijayanagar? Krishna Dev Raya. We need to take a look at the administration, and the economy of both the Vijayanagar and Bahmani Sultanates. And finally, one aspect which is germane to the study of the Vijayanagar Empire and Bahmani Sultanate was the constant conflict between them. Okay? So these are the things that we'll be seeking to address. And then we'll come to the Mughals. Now, Mughal history can be divided conveniently into two parts: the history of the Great Mughals, that is, the history of the Mughals studied through the 6 early emperors from 1526 to 1707, Babur to Aurangzeb, and the history of the lesser Mughals from Bahadur Shah I to Bahadur Shah Zafar, 1707 to 1857. Right? हमें किसको कवर करना है? ग्रेटर मुगल्स को. राइट? ये इतने गए गुजरे थे कि इनको पढ़ने की कोई जरूरत नहीं है, लेसर मुगल्स. राइट? So if we are talking about the history of India from 1707 to 1857, it will not be through the lens of the Mughals, rather it would be through the lens of either the regional kingdoms or through the lens of the expansion of British rule in India. ठीक है? तो हम इसलिए इस पर्सपेक्टिव से हिस्ट्री को कवर नहीं करेंगे. राइट? What are the important dimensions that we should understand? The administrative policies adopted by the Mughal emperors, such as the Mansabdari system, such as the Ain-e-Dhasala, etc. We should take a look at their religious policy. That is the evolution of the religious policy from Babar up to Aurangzeb. We should take a look at their imperial policy. That is the task of empire building through wars and conquests. We should take a look at their Rajput policy. And we should also consider their contribution to art and culture. Before we finally discuss the factors responsible for decline, right? With the decline of the Mughal Empire, what happened to the erstwhile Mughal Empire and its territory? It broke apart and several regional kingdoms emerged. कब हुआ ये process? Following the death of Aurangzeb in 1707. So 18th century was a period of transition. लेकिन वो ट्रांजिशन हमें नहीं कवर करना है, वो निखिल सर करवाएंगे इन मॉडर्न इंडिया. ठीक है. So history of the Marathas, history of the regional kingdoms, the establishment of British rule, British conquest of Bengal and the subsequent expansion, all those are going to be covered under modern India, not medieval India. Okay. One other aspect that needs to be studied separately is the emergence of Indo-Islamic architecture. कैसे कवर करेंगे? We'll break it down scientifically in terms of the concepts, the techniques that were employed, the building material and binding material that was used for such construction, the evolution of such buildings, how these buildings were beautified, ornamentation, and finally, some important examples. And when we are conducting this study, we are going to take a look at two different kinds of cultural streams. Imperial architecture and provincial architecture. Imperial architecture क्या होगा? The architecture that or the monuments that were commissioned by either the sultans from Delhi or the Mughal emperors. So जो emperor करवा रहा है construction, that would be categorized as imperial architecture. Provincial architecture commissioned by either the nobles or the ruling classes of the provinces or the regional kingdoms, such as Malwa or Bengal or Gujarat or Kashmir, etc. These kinds of things. ठीक है? तो इस एंगल से हम इसको एनालाइज करेंगे. आई होप द पिक्चर इज क्लियर. क्या क्या हमें कवर करना है? वी हैव अबाउट 30 क्लासेस टू डू ऑल ऑफ दिस. तो आपको भी मुझसे कोऑपरेट करना पड़ेगा एंड यू विल हैव टू होप कि मैं हमेशा अच्छे मूड में रहूं, राइट, अच्छे से रिवाइज करके आऊं ताकि आपका काम आसानी से हो जाए। नोट्स आपको क्लास के पहले हर सेक्शन के लिए मिल जाएंगे, उतना गारंटी है। यू मस्ट हैव रिसीव्ड नोट्स राइट नाउ, राइट। कौन कौन से टॉपिक्स उसमें कवर्ड है? द स्टोन एजेस, हड़प्पन सिविलाइजेशन एंड द वैदिक एज। So these are the first topics that we will be addressing. Online students, are there any doubts till now? No? चलिए दिन, राइट। तो सबसे पहली चीज क्या कवर करनी है हमें? दी स्टोन एजेस। What were the stone ages? These were the earliest phase of human development. Why are they known as the stone ages? Because human beings used tools made out of stone. Right? What were the important changes which took place throughout the length of the stone ages? Human beings gradually over time transformed themselves from simple consumers of food into producers of, right? So during the stone ages, humans transformed from food consumers to food producers. ठीक है? Now, if you were to look at the division of the stone ages, क्या emerge होकर के आता है? It can be divided into several stages, such as the Paleolithic age, the Mesolithic age, the Neolithic age, the Chalcolithic age, right? Which of these was the oldest? The Paleolithic age. The word paleo in Greek means old and lith means stone. So this is the old stone age. Similarly, Mesolithic is the middle stone age. Neolithic is the new stone age, and Chalco means copper. So this is the copper stone age. What does this tell us? That during the Chalcolithic age, human beings had learned how to use copper and had started using copper to fashion tools, to make tools. Time periods क्या हैं इनके? Roughly 5 lakh years ago to, let's say, 8000 BC. Mesolithic age 8000 to 5000 BC. Neolithic from 5000 to roughly 1000 BC. And Chalcolithic from roughly 3000 to 700 BC, right? लेकिन ये जो dates दी गई ना, all of these are indicative. ये concrete dates नहीं. Like even now, if you look at the different states of India, are all the states at the same level of development? No, some are relatively more developed, some are relatively less developed. Back then also, this was the case. Some communities had access to better technology. They had brought about major changes to the way in which they lived, how they obtained food, how they organized labor, how they organized their societies, how power was distributed as compared to others. So some ज़्यादा sophisticated हो गए थे, some कम sophisticated थे. So all these dates therefore are relative. They are simply indicative. Concrete dates. Right? Paleolithic age has further been divided into the lower, middle, and upper Paleolithic ages. ठीक है? Time period. 5 lakh years ago to roughly 50,000 BC. 50,000 to roughly 20,000 BC. Sorry, 30,000 BC and 30,000 to roughly 8,000 BC. Right? Why are they called lower, middle, and upper Paleolithic ages? This terminology comes from archaeology. When you vertically excavate any site, the remains found at the lowest levels, are they going to be the earliest or the latest ones? Earliest, जो पहले तब गए होंगे वो सबसे नीचे मिलेंगे. So the lower Paleolithic age, therefore, then the middle Paleolithic age, and then the upper Paleolithic age. So this terminology is based on stratigraphic analysis. Strata का मतलब होता है layer, right? So stratigraphic analysis is the analysis of the different layers of the archaeological record, right? सबसे पुराना वाला lower, फिर middle, फिर upper, right? Now what are the parameters of our study? क्या क्या देखना है हमें? Climate, human evolution, technology, subsistence pattern, settlement and dwelling pattern, geographical footprint, and society and culture. ठीक है? Now, during the Paleolithic age, क्लाइमेट किस तरह का होता था? The Pleistocene epoch was going on. That is, the Great Ice Age was going on. Temperatures would have been extremely cold. Living conditions would have been extremely harsh. Sea levels higher or lower than today? Much lower, roughly 200 meters lower on average as compared to today's mean sea level. Much of the globe was covered in permafrost. So polar ice caps covered roughly 60% of the globe on both hemispheres, in the north as well as the south. Only life that was possible was in the tropics and subtropical zone. That means living space was also quite limited. Do you think human population would have been extremely high, very large during this period? नहीं, बहुत छोटा population रहा होगा, right? Why? Because less amount of land is available. Over here also, the growing season is quite short, so primary productivity is also quite low. The temperatures are not warm enough to sustain lush forests, etc. These kinds of things. So human population was quite low during this period, right? And it is during this period that human beings started to evolve from their primate ancestors, right? So कभी आप लोगों ने वो वाला चार्ट देखा है जिसमें दिखाते हैं how the modern human being has emerged, right? From an ape-like ancestor, then a crouching type of man emerged, then a man emerged who could stand upright but looks quite different. He has a very large head which is dominated by the jaw, for example. Then some refinements start taking place, and then the modern man appears. So this entire process of development took place during the Paleolithic age itself. कैसे हुआ? During the lower Paleolithic age, human beings first evolved from primates, that is the ape-like ancestors of human beings, into a primitive species of humans known as the Homo habilis, right? Latin में homo का मतलब होता है man. Habilis means hand using. So this means he had opposable thumbs and knew how to use his hands for manipulating objects. He could build and use tools now, right? So he was the half erect hand using man. ठीक है? Then during the lower Paleolithic age itself, this Homo habilis further evolved into the Homo erectus. Erectus means upright, erect, right? So this was the upright man. He had the ability to stand up straight, right? Now, during this phase, human beings were not present in the Indian subcontinent at all. Which part of the world is known as the cradle of mankind? Central Africa, right? It is here that the earliest phases of evolution of human beings from primate took place. So this development from primates up to Homo erectus took place in Central Africa exclusively. Okay? And it is during this period that this Homo erectus began to venture out of his original homeland. He started to spread into different directions. One group of these Homo erectus people also arrived in the Indian subcontinent. किस route से आए थे? Did they take the land route or did they come by the sea route? Logically तो लगता है land route से आए होंगे, right? But reality is that they used the sea route. I told you now that this was the period of the Pleistocene epoch. Great ice age was going on. The mean sea level was almost 200 meters lower than it is today. And ocean का जो surface, ocean का जो bottom होता है, is it a flat featureless plain? No, it has a number of ridges and trenches. There are mountains beneath the surface of the sea, right? So these ridges must have been exposed back then, right? And to the Paleolithic man, they must have appeared as a chain of islands connecting the various land masses. The coastline must also have been much larger than it is today. Much of the continental shelf also would have been exposed, right? And therefore, these various continents would have been much closer to each other as compared to today as well. Okay? And as a result, the easiest path for the Homo erectus to arrive, to travel, was by building very rudimentary rafts. Hopping from island to island, they could have reached Indian subcontinent from the African continent, etc. Okay? So they came to India on rafts. And how can we say convincingly that Homo erectus definitely arrived in India? We must have some kind of archaeological record of this, right? कुछ discoveries हुई हैं? Yes. There is a place called Hathnora. कहाँ पर? In present day? Madhya Pradesh, Hoshangabad district of Madhya Pradesh. From here, a significant discovery was made in the 1960s. क्या discover हुआ? A human skull was discovered. But this was no skull of a modern human species. This was the skull belonging to a Homo erectus female, roughly 12 years of age, right? And this discovery or such kinds of humanoid fossil records are known as hominids. Okay? So hominid fossils has been found from Hathnora belonging to the lower Paleolithic age. Hathnora is located on the banks of which river? The Narmada. Thus it is also known as the Narmada man. Okay. Similarly, there's a place called Pallavaram just on the outskirts of present-day Chennai. In 1863, a British explorer made another significant discovery from here. Right? क्या discover किया? A stone axe, a hand axe made of stone. And this also confirmed the presence of the Paleolithic man in the region of Tamil Nadu during the lower Paleolithic age. ठीक है? किसने डिस्कवर किया था ये? रॉबर्ट ब्रूस फुट. When? In 1863. This was the first prehistoric tool to ever have been discovered in India. ठीक है? And these discoveries confirm the presence of Paleolithic cultures flourishing in the subcontinent. Okay? हाँ जी. How they came by sea? Otherwise, there would have been no way for them to travel to islands, right? There are several islands also where you find Paleolithic cultures. For example, Indonesia, Australia, यहाँ से भी मिल जाते हैं. Had they only taken the land route, could they ever have gone to those continents? नहीं पहुंच पाते. Logically, it means that they must have preferred the sea route over the land route. One major reason for this was also that जो अभी globe का temperate zone है ना, that was covered in permanent ice. It was under permafrost. So these kinds of migrations would have taken several years or maybe even several generations for these people. The Paleolithic man would not have been able to sustain themselves for such long periods in these harsh conditions. So the more logical route for them was to remain within the tropics and subtropics, and thus the sea route. Now we cannot say for sure, because no physical remains of the rafts or docks used by them, they are in place. But on the basis of paleoethnographic studies, that means observing the behavioral patterns of present-day communities which are still living in the Stone Ages, we are trying to estimate what may have been done by these prehistoric communities themselves. Right? So On the basis of this kind of estimation, only we are saying that probably they came using rafts via the sea route rather than the land route. Right. Now, next stage of development is going to take place in the Middle Paleolithic age. The Homo erectus evolved into the Homo sapien archaic. Right? Sapien का मतलब होता है thinking. And archaic means old. So this was the old thinking man. Right? So what does this tell us? That the cognitive ability, the ability of human beings to have complex thoughts and convey them, to organize their resources and to dominate their environment, to conserve their energy and to make efficient use of their resources, all these things were improving. And what do you think was the biggest factor behind this? क्या रहा होगा? See, first of all, as we are nearing the end of the ice age, the climate is warming up. Okay? And the ice age ended roughly with the end of the Paleolithic age itself. So gradually temperatures are warming up. Conditions are becoming more conducive for human life or human existence. Human beings have also started to make more associations with regards to the observations that they are making in nature. So ऑब्जेक्ट एसोसिएशन एंड कॉग्निशन उनका इंप्रूव हो रहा है. साथ में by the end of the lower Paleolithic age, from roughly 70,000 years ago onwards, on a regular basis human beings had started using fire, and this brought about a major change. क्या होगा अब इसकी वजह से? They could cook their food instead of eating only raw food, right? Their command over their environment also improved. Fire also played a major role in clearing of forest lands and making resources available to humans at a much larger scale as compared to earlier, right? So that means human population also started growing, and human beings had access to better food, which was better, or you can say which could have propelled them onto the fast lane of human evolution. How? Raw food को चबाने के लिए ज़्यादा force लगेगा, right? So the jaw, the teeth and the muscles of the jaw would have to be extremely large and strong. But once human beings switched to raw food, do you think that the jaw needed to be as robust as it was earlier? No. So those muscles are going to atrophy, the teeth are going to become smaller, the jaw is going to become more delicate, the head overall is going to become much lighter. And उसी limited space में किसी और चीज के बढ़ने के लिए जगह बढ़ जाएगी. And what is that? The brain. So one thing which started taking place as human beings evolved from Homo erectus to Homo sapiens archaic was the expansion of the cranial capacity. So जो cranium होता है जहाँ पे जो जिसको brain box बोलते हैं उसका size बढ़ने लग गया, and the cubic capacity of this cranium started to expand, thus resulting in an increase in the thinking power. But it was still the old thinking man. That means further developments also took place. Upper Paleolithic age, when the Homo sapien archaic finally evolved into the Homo sapien sapiens, right? So the thinking man, दो बार thinking आ रहा है. This is the wise man. He has the ability to formulate and process complex thoughts. He has the ability to convey them clearly, and he has the ability to communicate with other human beings in a way in which it was not possible ever before this. Okay? So this was the phase of a human evolution from the primates to the Homo sapiens sapiens. So evolution of primates to Homo sapiens sapiens took place entirely during the Paleolithic period itself. Clear? Then coming to their technology. What are we going to see? That with the passage of time, is the quality of stone tools going to improve or is it going to remain stagnant? It is going to improve incrementally. During the lower Paleolithic age, humans relied on extremely crude and heavy tools known as core tools. Okay? Why were they known as the core tools? They were made out of stone, लेकिन stone को भी tool बनाने के लिए उसको process करना पड़ता है, right? Suppose this was a stone that they had. What would they do? They would bash it against another stone, a larger stone. And what is going to happen to this stone? It is going to break apart. The outer edge is going to start flaking away, right? And रह क्या जाएगा? The exposed core, which has extremely sharp, jagged edges. Okay? Core tools were made of this portion of the stone. Is this clear? It had tools such as hand axes, choppers, cleavers, etc. Which species of humans were these tools being used by? Modern humans or primitive species of humans? Primitive species of humans. Do you think they had a great degree of technological sophistication? Did they have a very strong cognitive ability? No. So, do you think that those human beings were adept at performing very fine tasks? No. So, these tools would also reflect their cognitive ability. They would be used for performing rough tasks involving the use of blunt force, brute force, right? So brute force wale kaam ke liye, such as chopping off certain things, maybe cutting down of trees or branches, or chopping off meat, or cleaving off some other things, these kinds of tools were used. Okay? What kind of stone was preferred for this? Do you think human beings would have preferred the use of some soft sedimentary rock for this? No. Why? Because it would not have been useful for performing these cutting and chopping tasks. Why? Because soft stone में दिक्कत क्या होती है? That they lose their edge very quickly, right? They become blunt. So they needed some kind of hard stone, right? But should the stone be such a quality that it does not break when it is smashed against a certain rock? No, it should break easily also. So they wanted a brittle but a hard stone. And this brought them to quartzite. किस तरह का रॉक होता है ये? It is a metamorphic igneous rock. What is the grain structure like? It is crystalline in nature, having large or small crystals, large crystals, and it is hard and brittle. ठीक है? Now, one term that is associated with lower Paleolithic core tools is Acheulean tools, right? This is a category of lower Paleolithic stone tools only, right? तो उसी का एक subset है, but they are of relatively higher quality. That means greater time and effort has been invested in refining these tools in comparison to the ordinary stone tools. The name Acheulean is derived from a suburb of Paris, where such categories of Paleolithic stone tools were discovered for the first time. तो हिस्ट्री में जनरली एक आर्कियोलॉजिकल कन्वेंशन होता है दैट फ्रॉम वेयर एवर द अर्लीस्ट डिस्कवरी हैज बीन मेड, that entire culture or civilization or even technology is going to be named after that. For example, with regards to the Indus Saraswati civilization, what was the first site to be excavated? Harappa. Thus the name Harappan civilization. From some caves around the suburbs of Paris in a place called Aquileia, some tools were found, and all tools which fall into this relatively developed category of core tools, they are known as Acheulean tools. So this is a piece of information that you can store away in your mind, and on the off chance if a question comes in the prelims, you know that this is a category of lower Paleolithic core tools. ठीक है? Then we come to the middle Paleolithic age. Right? What has happened by this point of time? Climate has improved relatively. Human beings have also become more evolved. They have started using or eating cooked food instead of raw food. Their cognitive ability has also increased substantially. And correspondingly, their stone tool technology is also going to improve. From core tools, they now graduated to flake tools. ठीक है? तो फ्लेक्स क्या है? The outer portions of these stones, which earlier were being discarded, now human beings are going to start using these to fashion new types of tools, right? And what is going to be the difference between the core tools and the flake tools? They are going to be used for different purposes, right? तो उनका पर्पस अलग हो जाएगा. किस तरह के फ्लेक टूल्स? borers, scrapers, points, hooks, etc. These kinds of tools they are going to start making. Right? What kind of activities do you think these tools were used for? For removing the skin of animals, for removing the animal hide, for scraping the bark off of trees, for digging up holes or digging out fleshy roots such as potatoes or other kinds of tubers, etc. For fishing, hooks banane lag gaye, or for harpoon fishing, these kinds of points were used now, right? So in response to the changing climate and cognitive ability, a corresponding change in the stone tool technology also came about. Clear? And then finally, during the upper Paleolithic age, from flake tools, blade tools are going to emerge, including tools such as blades, burins, needles, perforators, hooks, etc. Right? Which part of the stone do you think these were made out of? Core or flake? Flake, but they were a more refined version of the flake tools. What was the speciality of these blade tools? That one of their edges was given an extremely sharp edge as a result of continuous polishing and grinding against other stones. Okay? So these were relatively more refined tools. And what kind of tasks do you think were performed with these kinds of tools? Task involving blunt force or task involving much more delicate activity? Much more delicate activity, such as sewing or making holes into tough animal hides so that they could be sewn together. These kinds of things, or making small incisions in order to collect maybe some kind of tree sap, etc. Right? Or maybe lancing a boil or a blister on the limbs of other human beings. So primitive form of surgery also may have started to emerge at this point of time. Right? So इस तरह की चीजों के लिए अब इसको use किया जाएगा. Is this clear? So if we go back to this chart, हम यहाँ पे क्या बोल सकते हैं? Can divide it into three parts. Core, flake and blade tools. ठीक है? नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन आता है सबसिस्टेंस पैटर्न का. व्हाट डू यू मीन सबसिस्टेंस पैटर्न? क्या मतलब होता है इसका? How did human beings obtain food to sustain themselves? During this point of time, human beings were living what kind of lifestyle? Hunter-gatherer lifestyle or sedentary agriculturalist lifestyle? Hunter-gatherer lifestyle. So their main sources of food came from hunting, gathering, and scavenging. Right? Now, out of hunting and gathering, which one do you think was the more important activity for the prehistoric man? Hunting or gathering? Earlier, it was believed that hunting provided them the main portion of their diet. But recently, the understanding has changed. Why? Because उस समय climate कैसा था? Extremely cold and harsh climate. The ecology was dominated by which kind of animals? Small animals or extremely large woolly animals, mammals? Large woolly mammals, such as the mammoth, woolly mammoth, or the woolly rhinoceros, or the woolly buffalo, etc., bison. These kinds of animals dominated. Human beings during the Paleolithic period, do you think their main objective would have been to expend their energy in order to obtain their food, or to conserve their energy? Conserve their energy, क्योंकि sources of food quite लिमिटेड है. And which would have been the better source, large animals or plants which could be gathered? Plants. So according to recent scholarly understanding, gathering was the most important source of food. क्या गैदर करते थे ये? Leafy vegetables, various kinds of herbs, different kinds of fungi including mushrooms, and various kinds of plants along with fruits and flowers. Right? After hunting, after gathering, it appears that scavenging for food was another important activity. क्या मतलब होता है scavenging? Stealing the kill of someone else or surviving off of the discarded scraps of other people or animals. तो किसी जानवर ने कोई kill किया, you go and steal it from him, or even other humans से steal कर लेना. तो hunting, gathering and scavenging were the important activities. ठीक है? Settlement and dwelling pattern. Do you think that these people lived permanently in the same place, or do you think they moved around constantly? Moved around constantly. Why? Why do you think they needed to move around? In search of food, shelter, and sexual partners, right? They would have to constantly move from place to place, right? So, this kind of lifestyle is known as nomadism. Okay? They did not settle down in any particular place for any significant length of time. In such a scenario, do you think that they would have wasted their time and energy in building artificial homes? No, rather they would have preferred natural shelter, such as caves and rock shelters. So that is where they used to live. Caves and rock shelters में. Are you familiar with the name of the most famous prehistoric caves in India? मध्य प्रदेश में है, रायसेन डिस्ट्रिक्ट में, भीमबेटका, राइट? Bhimbetka was continuously occupied right from the lower Paleolithic age up to the medieval age. Right? It is a collection of 36 different caves which were discovered post-independence in 1953 or 1956, I can't remember. And the most significant discovery from Bhimbetka is the rich collection of prehistoric art, rock paintings that have been left behind by its ancient dwellers. Clear? Next, coming to the geographical footprint. In which regions did the Paleolithic people prefer to live, and which regions did they avoid? Paleolithic finding or Paleolithic remains can be found from across the subcontinent except for one particular physiography. कहां से नहीं मिलते हैं? The northern plains, the Indo-Gangetic plains, वहां से नहीं मिलते हैं. Why do you think we do not find Paleolithic remains from the northern plains? What kinds of plains are these? Are these erosional plains or depositional plains? Have they been created because of the removal of certain material from this area or the deposition of certain material into this area? Deposition. किस चीज का deposition हुआ है? Alluvium, soil sediments का. What has brought these soil sediments to this place? Wind or water? Water. The rivers, the Indus and Gangetic river systems, their various tributaries, they have brought this alluvium into this northern plain. Now, one very important input that was critical for the survival of the prehistoric man was access to a large quantity of rocks and rock shelters and caves. Do you think that rocks and rock shelters इस तरह के alluvial plains में बहुत ज्यादा मिलेंगे या बहुत कम मिलेंगे? बहुत कम मिलेंगे, right? Therefore, one reason why they avoided the northern plains was the lack of adequate rocks and caves. Secondly, एक और चीज थी. Now, जब आप लोग geography cover करोगे ना, you are going to learn about the various physiographic divisions of India. One of those physiographic divisions is the northern plains, and northern plains are the youngest physiographic division of India. They started to form only roughly 20 lakh years ago. तो 2 million years ago उनका formation शुरू होता है, and this makes the Indus and Ganga river systems extremely young river systems. एंड यंग रिवर्स की क्या क्वालिटीज होती हैं? जैसे यंग लोग ज्यादा एनर्जेटिक होते हैं, वैसे ही यंग रिवर्स में भी ज्यादा एनर्जी देखने के लिए मिलती है. दिस इज अ पीरियड व्हेन द रिवर चैनल्स आर स्टिल क्वाइट अनस्टेबल. फ्रीक्वेंट फ्लडिंग होती है, रिवर कोर्सेज जो है वो फ्रीक्वेंटली चेंज करते रहते हैं अपने डायरेक्शन को. दैट इज व्हाई यू फाइंड कि नॉर्थ इंडिया और पाकिस्तान दोनों में ही फ्रीक्वेंट फ्लडिंग होती है. बांग्लादेश इज ऑल्सो प्रोन टू फ्रीक्वेंट फ्लडिंग. This was even more magnified back then, right? जब Paleolithic period चल रहा था, and because of this frequent flooding, this region became almost inaccessible to the Paleolithic people. In which climatic zone do you think the northern plains come in? टेम्परेट जोन में आते हैं या सब ट्रॉपिकल में या फिर ट्रॉपिकल जोन में? सब ट्रॉपिकल जोन में आते हैं. एंड एज अ रिजल्ट यहाँ पे नेचुरली बहुत डेंस फॉरेस्ट एग्जिस्ट करते थे, राइट? एंड डिड द Paleolithic man have access to technology to clear these forests on a large scale? नहीं. They needed to move around frequently in search of food, and this was prohibited by the presence of these dense forests. राइट. एंड फाइनली, घने जंगलों में किस तरह के एनिमल्स मिलेंगे? लार्ज वाइल्ड एनिमल्स. So the biggest threat was that you are going for lunch and you become the lunch yourself, right? So in order to avoid this kind of thing, they stayed away from the northern plains. लेकिन यहाँ पे एक exception है, and that becomes very important for you to know about. Till now, only one Paleolithic site has been found from the entire northern plains, that is the plains of the Indus as well as the Ganga. और यूपीएससी ना इस तरह के इंफॉर्मेशन में काफी इंटरेस्टेड रहता है. सो यू शुड नो द नेम ऑफ दैट प्लेस. द only Paleolithic site discovered in the northern plains कौन सा है? कल्पी. कहां पे है? इन यूपी, जिलाउन डिस्ट्रिक्ट ऑफ यूपी. ठीक है. Now, if the Paleolithic people avoided these northern plains, so where did they prefer to live? जहां पर ये सारे लिमिटिंग फैक्टर्स नहीं होते होंगे, एंड वेयर द फिजियोग्राफी एंड द क्लाइमेट वुड हैव बीन सच दैट इट सपोर्टेड ह्यूमन लाइफ. So where do you think they preferred to live? In hills, hilly areas where they could have easy access to natural caves or rocks or rocky outcrops of plateaus where similar conditions would exist, or rift valleys, or famous rocky plateaus themselves, right? And as a result, most significant concentrations of Paleolithic sites you will find from regions such as the Chota Nagpur Plateau, कहां पर है? झारखंड, छत्तीसगढ़ और वेस्ट बंगाल वाले रीजन में. दी नर्मदा रिवर, what kind of a river is it? A rift valley river है, right? It flows through a rift valley. The शिवालिक हिल्स कहां पर है? These are the lowest hills along the Himalayan mountain ranges. Then the salt range, where northern Punjab of Pakistan. Then we have the Sohan Valley, where also in northern Punjab, Pakistan, close to the salt range. इस तरह की जगहों पर आपको Paleolithic sites ज्यादा मिलती हैं. Why? Because these kinds of limiting factors do not affect these regions. So, geographical footprint, the entire subcontinent except for the northern plains. Okay. Then coming to the society and culture. Now, what kind of a social structure do you think that the Paleolithic man had? Did they have a very organized, sophisticated social structure, a complex social structure, or a relatively simple one? A relatively simple one. Why? First of all, human population was very small, and नेचर ऑफ ह्यूमन इंटरैक्शंस विद ईच अदर ज्यादातर किस तरह का रहता होगा? वुड देयर बी मोर अपॉर्चुनिटीज फॉर कॉन्फ्लिक्ट और कोऑपरेशन? Conflict, human beings were in constant competition against each other for food, for shelter, for sexual partners, etc. So brief interactions होते होंगे लोगों के, and they would be extremely violent in nature. And thus initially the Paleolithic man lived a solitary life, right? Right. So he did not live with others, he lived alone. And slowly, as human cognition and ecological conditions improved, small bands or small groups of 2 to 4 individuals began emerging. This was the first phase of human socialization. Then, by the end of the Paleolithic age, it is believed that with the development of speech and the use of fire, it is believed that small bands of 20 to 40 individuals emerged. ठीक है? This transformation was facilitated by the growth of human population, the development of speech during the during the end of the lower Paleolithic age, the use of fire, and higher food availability. ठीक है? However, despite this, these were still the early days of human socialization, and the human social consciousness was it well developed, or was it in its initial stages of development? Initial stages mein. So it was, you can say, rudimentary in nature. And how can we say with certainty that it was in its initial stages of development? That human beings did not necessarily conceive themselves of being part of a larger group that they identified or associated themselves with. This is based upon a study of the art that they made. ठीक है? The most prominent form of prehistoric art is rock paintings. Clear? कहां पे बनाते थे ये रॉक पेंटिंग्स को? Walls of caves and rock shelters. Non-certain other objects also. Such as एक जगह है पटने. This is in Maharashtra. From here, we have discovered a fragment of an eggshell. Egg किस bird का? Ostrich का, right? And surprising discovery क्या था? That it had engravings of geometric patterns on them. ठीक है? Now, the earliest rock paintings belong to the upper Paleolithic age. Right? Now these rock paintings were made using what kinds of colors? Colors कैसे obtain करते थे? Mineral pigments से, ठीक है? Colors made of natural mineral pigments. As a result, जो मिनरल्स एक पर्टिकुलर जगह पर अबंडेंट होंगे वो कलर्स भी वहां पर ज्यादा दिखेंगे, एंड दोज व्हिच आर रेयर you will not find them or find them very rarely. The common colors used were red, black and white. Green and yellow appeared much more rarely. And which color is conspicuous by absence? कौन सा primary color? Blue. Why? Because there were no natural sources for blue in India. Therefore, it does not exist at all. Green and yellow were obtained from a semi-precious stone known as chalcedony. Right? Now, in its hydrated form, it has a yellow coloration. And in its original form, it is green. What kind of a stone is chalcedony? Is it an ordinary stone or a semi-precious stone? Semi-precious stone. Therefore, its use was much more rare. And most abundantly used colors were red, black and white. रेड ऑब्टेन्ड फ्रॉम हेमेटाइट, फेरिक ऑक्साइड, जिसको गेरू बोलते हैं, राइट? It is found naturally in red soil. Black obtained from लैंप ब्लैक, सोट जिसको बोलते हैं, राइट? These are the unburnt carbon particles left behind by an open flame. And white obtained from chuna, lime, calcium carbonate, right? So these were the mineral pigments used to obtain various colors. Now, why we are saying that human beings did not have a proper awareness of themselves belonging to a social group or organization is because of the popular themes of Paleolithic paintings. Most common themes क्या दिखेंगे आपको? Animal and bird figures. Then hunting scenes. And the rarest scenes you are going to find is depictions of human beings. ठीक है? They are extremely rare. In fact, none of the upper Paleolithic paintings at Bhimbetka have these scenes at all. Okay? There is only one place in the entire Indian subcontinent where you get the glimpses of social organization during the Paleolithic period. कहाँ से? There's a place called Lakhudiyar. This is on the outskirts of Almora in Uttarakhand. And what do we find over here? एक फायर के अराउंड लोगों ने हाथ पकड़े हुए हैं और झंगलाला कर रहे हैं? नहीं, we don't find that. We find very rudimentary depictions of human presence over here. We find a collection of fingerprints and handprints. And since human figures, community life, cooking scenes or feasting scenes, etc., they are not depicted at all in the entirety of the Paleolithic art, this indicates that concepts such as community, family, tribe, etc., they had not developed fully. Okay? The Paleolithic society was a band society. There must have been some kind of power distribution, but in the absence of written records, we have no way of saying exactly what were the parameters of this power distribution, how exactly decisions were made. ये सब के बारे में हमें पता नहीं लगता है, but मोटा मोटा ऊपर से देखने में क्या लगता है that it was in the early stages of evolution. ठीक है? Going back to that table, सोसाइटी एंड कल्चर में क्या देखने के लिए मिल रहा है? Solitary to band society and animal and bird figures. Do we have any indication of the emergence of religious beliefs at this point of time? कोई ऐसा इंडिकेशन हमको नहीं मिलता है. क्लियर? सो ये तो हो गए डेवलपमेंट्स ड्यूरिंग दी Paleolithic एज. Similarly, we have to consider the Mesolithic and the Neolithic ages, right? Mesolithic age में एक climatic change हुआ. That was the end of the Pleistocene, end of the Great Ice Age, and the beginning of the Holocene epoch. Since the process of human evolution has already attained its final stage in the Paleolithic age, no further evolution is going to take place. There are going to be significant changes in the technology, subsistence, settlement, dwelling pattern, geographical footprint, and society and culture during the Mesolithic and the Neolithic phases. Paleolithic age में man was a consumer of food. Neolithic phase में man is going to emerge as a food producer. Main sources of food are going to be agriculture and animal husbandry. Mesolithic period is going to be a period of transition between them. ठीक है, so that is how it should be seen. अब ये सारे developments हम कल की क्लास में डिस्कस करेंगे. I'm going to end this lecture for now. I hope you were able to follow all these developments. मेरा ऑब्जेक्टिव ये है दैट इन योर माइंड्स मेंटल इमेज एक बनना चाहिए और पिक्चर के फॉर्म में आपको एक मूविंग पिक्चर्स के फॉर्म में मूवी टाइप की चलनी चाहिए दैट व्हाट वाज द काइंड ऑफ लाइफ दैट दीस पीपल वर लिविंग, राइट? दैट इज द बेस्ट वे टू अप्रिशिएट दिस टॉपिक. अदरवाइज दिस टॉपिक में बिकम एक्सट्रीमली बोरिंग, बहुत ज्यादा फैक्चुअल लगने लग जाएगा एंड रिकॉल करने में बहुत दिक्कत होगी. तो वो अवॉइड करने के लिए इस तरह से हम क्लासेस को कंडक्ट करेंगे दैट यू आर एबल टू विजुअलाइज दीज चेंजेस, यू आर एबल टू वर्चुअली प्लेस योर सेल्फ इन दो सराउंडिंग्स एंड सी फॉर योर सेल्फ कि किस तरह का लाइफ वो रह रहे होंगे. नाउ इफ यू आर गेटिंग दिस काइंड ऑफ एक्सपीरियंस देन आई एम सक्सेसफुल. अगर नहीं हो रहा है सो आई एम एक्सपेक्टिंग अ फीडबैक फ्रॉम यू गाइज. यू आर क्या चेंज कर सकते हैं, ठीक है? With regards to the language that I'm using, a mixture of Hindi and English, primarily English. Does anybody have a problem with that? चलेगा सबको? Online students? Any doubts or issues that you guys may have? No? चलिए then. तो आप लोगों का टास्क क्या है कि कल क्लास में आने से पहले ये नोट्स पढ़ के आओगे एंड ट्राई टू रीड दोज नोट्स इस तरह से कि आपके दिमाग में वो मेंटल इमेज चलती जाए, राइट? सो दैट यू आर एबल टू बेटर ग्रास्प दीज थिंग्स विद अस. क्लियर? ऑल्सो यू शुड लुक एट द प्रीवियस ईयर्स क्वेश्चन पेपर्स. हाँ, एक चीज मैं भूल गया था आपको बताना, वो जो इंट्रोडक्टरी सेशन में मैंने बताया था कि नोट्स और रेफरेंस बुक्स और स्टडी मटेरियल के बारे में बताऊंगा. तो माय टेक इज दैट एंशिएंट इंडिया के लिए the best source that you can refer to is the NCERT. अब ओल्ड एनसीईआरटी भी है, नई एनसीईआरटी भी है, बोथ हैव देयर ओन सेट ऑफ एडवांटेजेस. पुरानी एनसीईआरटी का फायदा ये है that it has been arranged extremely logically, chronological order में. So if you want a complete picture of the evolution of Indian history throughout the ancient period, refer to the old NCERT. न्यू एनसीईआरटी का फायदा ये है पढ़ने का कि क्वेश्चन वहां से ज्यादातर आ रहे हैं, राइट? सो मेरा सजेशन ये है that if you guys have the time and the inclination, you should first read the old NCERT and then supplement that with the new NCERT. लेकिन blindly नहीं पढ़ना है NCERT को. Whenever you read a chapter, look at the previous year's questions that have been asked from that chapter. That is the only way in which you will be able to identify कि उस किताब में क्या चीज important है and more importantly क्या चीज को आप avoid कर सकते हैं. What are the questions that are kind of questions that are appearing from a particular topic, right? And your previous year's questions are therefore going to act like a permanent guide to you. So these NCERTs, I think, are the only other source that you should be referring to apart from your class notes and the handouts. ठीक है? हमारा क्लास में ऐसे ही चलेगा कि ज्यादातर हम लोग बोर्ड पे ही करेंगे. कुछ अगर अलग से डिक्टेट करवाना होगा, सो आई लेट यू नो, अदरवाइज योर हैंडआउट्स आर गोइंग टू बिकम योर कोर नोट्स। आपको कोई भी चीज ऐड करनी है तो इन्हीं हैंडआउट्स में ही ऐड करोगे, राइट? So that is how you should proceed. Clear? Shall I end this lecture? Online students, our PDFs are notes or we should make it. Now, PDFs आपके notes जरूर हैं, but आपको खुद के notes भी prepare करने चाहिए. But you should not simply be copying down whatever is written in the PDFs. उसका कोई फायदा नहीं होगा. You should be focusing upon consolidating all those things into maybe अगर Paleolithic period है, all the information you should be able to condense on a single side of an A4 sheet. तो 2-3 बार आप पढ़ोगे उसको, you will be able to revise those notes, and then using the mental image that you have, you should be able to prepare all these notes. तो अलग अलग डायमेंशंस मैंने ऑलरेडी बता ही दिए हैं कि ह्यूमन एवोल्यूशन कैसे हुआ, टेक्नोलॉजी क्या था, सबसिस्टेंस पैटर्न, ड्वेलिंग पैटर्न, एटसेट्रा एटसेट्रा. तो वहां से कुछ कुछ इंपॉर्टेंट फीचर्स लेकर के, कुछ इंपॉर्टेंट एग्जांपल्स लेकर के आप एक सिनॉप्सिस बनाने की कोशिश करो, राइट? सो दैट साइड बाय साइड यू हैव एक्सेस टू बोथ योर हैंडआउट्स आल्सो एज वेल एज दोज सिनॉप्टिक नोट्स, सो दैट बाय द एंड ऑफ आवर प्रिपरेशन आपके पूरे वो रिवीजन नोट्स तैयार हो गए हैं, एंड टुवर्ड्स द एंड यू विल नॉट बी पैनिकिंग कि वो मेरे पास नोट्स कहाँ से आएंगे. तो नोट्स प्रिपेयर कीजिए, बट फॉर्मल टाइप ऑफ नोट्स मत प्रिपेयर कीजिए, सिनॉप्सिस प्रिपेयर कीजिए. क्लियर? फ्रॉम विच क्लास वी कैन स्टार्ट एनसीईआरटीज? 11th 12th के एनसीईआरटी पढ़िए, राइट? अगर हिस्ट्री में बिल्कुल भी बैकग्राउंड नहीं है तो क्लास 6 से शुरू कर सकते हैं, लेकिन क्लास 6 टू क्लास 10 काफी फंडामेंटल चीजें बताई हुई हैं, तो दैट मे नॉट बी नेसेसरी फॉर एवरीबडी. तो क्लास 11 and 12. Okay? All right then. Thank you for your time, guys. कल मिलते हैं दोबारा इसी समय.